On the 260th Founders Day, 130 years from now, those class photos of you will probably be talking AI style. So, things to look forward to. We begin our formal program with tradition. Back by popular demand, the upper school Latin students form a small but mighty trio of singers. Latin Elvis is in the house again. A classic translation of his 1956 chart topper, Love Me Tender, followed by a song for this Mardi Gras season, a Latin rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In. At the end of that song, listen for the school Latin motto, Discimus ut decamus. We learn so we may lead. Latin declamation has been tradition at Woodward's Founders Celebration since at least 1896. So has poetry recitation. Under the direction of themselves, the class of 2029 continues this tradition. The poem you will hear tonight has become a precious Woodward tradition that connects classes together. Please welcome our class of 2029.
Walking by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Whose woods these are, I think I know.
His house is in the village though.
He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse might think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near.
Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year.
He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake.
The only other sounds the sweep of easy winds and down the creek.
The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep.
And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep.
At Woodward, we recognize that artistic expression is an inextricable aspect of our humanity. Our upper school ELA lab program, Language and Performance, is where students not only hone public speaking and presentation skills, but maybe you want to, okay. Oh. No, I know it's your turn. I was just going to say a lot of things about stuff. I'll just skip some of it. No, it's a lot. You were right to come up and stop me. So tonight our 11th and 12th grade language and performance students will focus on tradition by storytelling through the art of rhetoric. The only way to learn this art form is to study those who have mastered it. Tonight's performances will tell a story that informs and spans 4 centuries in our country through the words of 10 pioneering women. Their common thread, they were and are strong to live, and through their words and actions represent the values we at Woodward hold dear. So, let us begin. Next Monday marks the 249th anniversary of the British evacuating Boston on March 17, 1776. When Abigail Adams wrote to her husband John Adams 2 weeks later, she shared the uncertainty she felt before the evacuation and expressed a new sense of hope for the future. Jarvia Ramos shares that letter with us tonight.
I wish you would write me a letter half as long as I write you. And tell me if you may, where your fleet are gone. What sort of defense Virginia can make against our common enemy, whether it is so situated as to make an able defense. I hope their riflemen, who show themselves as savages and even bloodthirsty, are not a specimen of the generality of the people. I am sometimes ready to think that the passion for liberty cannot be equally as strong in the breasts of those who are accustomed to deprive their fellow creatures of theirs. I think very differently about the approach of spring than I did a month ago. I think the sun looks brighter, the birds sing more melodiously, and spring puts on a more cheerful countenance. We feel a temporary peace as the poor fugitives are returning to their deserted habitations. I long to hear they declare an independency. By the way, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it is necessary, I desire that you would remember the ladies and be more generous and careful to them than that of your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. As you know, all men could be tyrants if they could. If their inattention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion in which we will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. That your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit of no dispute. As you wish to be happy, We give up the harsh title of master for the more tender and endearing one of friend. I need not say how much I am your ever faithful friend.
Maria W. Stewart was one of the first American women of any race to work as a public speaker. She was an abolitionist and women's rights activist. This speech was given in Boston on September 21st, 1832, to the New England Anti-Slavery Society. Please welcome Naima Montalban to bring Maria's words to life.
Why sit ye here and die? If we say we'll go to a foreign land, the famine and the pestilence are there, and there we shall die. If we sit here, we shall die. I have heard much respect in the horrors of slavery, but may heaven forbid that the generality of my color throughout the United States should experience any more of its horrors than to be a servant of servants, or hewers of wood, and drawers of water. Tell us no more of Southern slavery, for with few exceptions. Although I may be very erroneous in my opinion, yet I consider our condition a little better than that. Yet after all, methinks there are no chains so galling as the chains of ignorance, no fetters so binding as those that bind the soul and exclude it from the vast field of scientific and useful knowledge. Oh, had I received the advantages of early education, my ideas would, ere now, have expanded far and wide. But alas, I possess nothing but moral capability, no teachings but the teachings of the Holy Spirit. I have had several individuals of my sex who transact business for themselves. If providing our girls were to give them the most satisfactory of references, would they not be willing to grant them an equal opportunity with the others? Their response has been, for their own part, they had no objections. But as was not the custom, were they to take them into their employ, they would be in danger of losing the public patronage. And such is the powerful force of prejudice. Let our girls possess what amiable qualities of the soul they may. Let their characters be as fair and spotless as innocence itself. Let their natural taste and ingenuity be what it may. For it is impossible to escape an individual to rise above the conditions of a servant. Why this cruel and unfeeling distinction? Is it merely because God has made our complexions so vary? If it be, oh, shame to the soft, relenting humanity. Though black their skins, as shades of night, their hearts are pure, their souls are white. Few white persons of either sex who are calculated for anything else are willing to spend their lives and bury their talents performing mean, servile labor. And such is the horrible idea that I entertain respecting the life of slavery, that if I conceive of there being no possibility of my rising above the conditions of the servant, I would gladly hail death as a welcome messenger. A horrible idea indeed, to possess noble souls aspiring for high and honorable acquirements, yet confined by the chains of ignorance and poverty, to live continual lives of drudgery and toil. Neither do I know of any who have enriched themselves by spending their lives as house domestics, washing windows, shaking carpets, brushing boots, or tending to gentlemen's tables. I could but die for expressing my sentiments. And I am as willing to die by the sword as the pestilence. For I am the true born American. Your blood flows through my veins, and your spirit fires my breast.
Born and raised in Massachusetts, Lucy Stone was a teacher, speaker, women's rights advocate and abolitionist. She was well known for her powers of persuasion and public speaking. It's been said that she convinced Susan B. Anthony to join the suffrage movement. She kept her own name after marrying Henry Blackwell, and refused to pay her New Jersey property tax bill in 1858 because it was taxation without representation. She gave the following speech in October 1855. Our own Perry Bitter explains why Lucy Stone was a disappointed woman.
From the first years to which my memory stretches, I have been a disappointed woman. I was disappointed when I came to seek a profession worthy any mortal being, yet every employment was closed to me except that of the teacher, the seamstress, and the housekeeper. In education, in marriage, in religion, in everything, disappointment is the lot of woman, and it shall be the business of my life to deepen this disappointment in every woman's heart until she will bow down to it no longer. I wish that women, instead of being walking showcases, instead of begging of their fathers and brothers of the latest and gayest new bonnet, would ask of them their rights. The question of women's rights is a practical one. We want rights. The flower merchant, the house builder, and the postman charge us no less on account of our sex, but when we endeavor to earn money to pay all of this, then indeed we find the difference. Man, if he have energy, may hew out for himself a path where no mortal has ever trod, held back only by what is in himself, and the world is all before him where to choose. And we are glad that is so, men, brothers, but the same society that drives forth young men keeps woman at home, a dependent, working little cats on worsted, little dogs on punctured paper. But if she goes heartily and bravely to give herself to some worthy cause, she is out of her sphere and loses caste. Women working in tailor shops are paid 1/3 as much as men. Someone in Philadelphia stated that women make fine shirts for 12.5 cents a piece. Not one of them is allowed to make more than 9 a week, and the sum thus earned after deducting rent and fuel leaves them just 3.5 cents a day for bread. Is it a wonder why women are driven to prostitution? Female teachers in New York are paid $50 a year, and for every such situation, there are 500 applicants. I know not what you believe of God, but I believe that God gave us longings and yearnings to be filled, that we should not dedicate all of our time to feeding and clothing the body. The current condition of woman causes a horrible perversion of the marriage relation. It is asked of a lady, has she married well? Oh yes, her husband is rich. Women must marry for a home, and you men are the sufferers by this. For a woman that loathes you may marry you because you have the means to get the money which she cannot have. But when woman can enter the lists with you and earn money for herself, only then will she marry you for deep and earnest affection.
Another woman who recognized the absurdity of taxation without representation and refused to pay hers, Mary Britton, was among the first members of the State Association of Colored Teachers, which was established in 1877. Evelyn Biresh performs the speech Britton gave in support of women's suffrage in 1887.
The atmosphere in which I live is not a very healthy one in favor of a women's suffrage. For that reason, I had only been able to see one side of the question. Now that I am able to see both sides, I am convicted of my error and fastly am converted to truth and justice. From my early youth, I have been a strong advocate for human rights. As I grew older and more decided steps were taken in this direction, I was talked of as a strong-minded woman. Not knowing the import of this, I argued against the term, always saying, however, that I favor human rights, not women's rights. Now to the noble women I wish to attract so much as I said, to deprive them of the liberty to follow freely their own natural gifts. It was both unjust and inconsistent to tell women to prepare themselves to rear talented children, but then to close up the way by which girls could use those natural talents. Women inherit all the natural talents that men do. Each has something of the other's gifts, and each has a superiority over the other. The fundamental principle of women's rights is that every human being has a right to mark out his or her own destiny, subject only to the restrictions of society that are applied to all alike. I now throw away the old ignorant prejudices which I am ashamed to have ever held, and stand here before you this evening, fearlessly defending women's suffrage as a potent agency in public reforms. There must be men of honor among you here this evening who are ashamed that women bear equality with men. The support of their families, in many instances, working harder, better, and for longer duration, and yet receive less compensation for their labor, only because they are women. Women have risen in the growth of civilization. Her sphere is enlarged, and she has grown better just by that enlargement which was predicted would unsex her. She has taken first prize in mathematics, science, and philosophy. She has taken degrees in law, medicine, and theology. She is employed in the mills and manufactories. She is a stenographer, typewriter, cashier, clerk, telegraph and telephone operator. She is in the trades and professions. Indeed, she can go almost anywhere she chooses to go. Woman suffers all the wrong and impositions of the working man, and the addition of the greater injustice that a woman shall receive less wages for the same amount and quality of work, and still receive less than a man simply because she is a woman. Taxation without representation is tyranny. It is because woman is not like man that she refuses to be represented by him, making laws to spend her tax money and to judge her in court. If woman is the same as man, then she has the same rights. If she is distinct from man, then she has a right to the ballot to make decisions for her government. Charles Sumner said, "In the progress of human civilization, woman's suffrage is sure to come. Justice and common sense must conquer in the long run. The light is dawning and the time is fast approaching. No movement of any great importance has ever taken place in the world in which woman has not taken a prominent role as a worker. And most assuredly is women's suffrage a potent agency."
In the 1890s, when students were taking their once weekly News of the Day class with Principal Harry E. Small, Ida B. Wells was writing it. Born into enslavement in 1862, Ida B. Wells would go on to be a teacher, a suffragist, and a journalist. Tonight you will hear what she believed the requisites necessary for men and women to be true leaders, performed by Eden Logan.
Mr. President, I do not know how the subject which has been given me is to harmonize with the aims of this association, unless it be that it recognizes the great student we are engaged in teaching without the one great essential of elevation and progress, true leadership, and that from the schools and colleges here represented must come the true leaders of the people. The main requisites of such leadership are first, devotion of principle and courage of conviction. No great reform in the world's history has ever been successful or far-reaching in its influence without an earnest, steadfast devotion which so takes hold of its leaders that they willingly brave the world's censure. Aye, even death itself in its defense. And when Lovejoy died in defense of freedom of the press, Brave old John Brown's blood was shed at Harper's Ferry in advocacy of liberty, to whom his son truly says, he gave noble life for a mighty sentiment. Their deaths were not in vain. They not only wrote their name in the highest temple in the niche of fame, but added impetus to the cause of liberty and Christianity. As Christ died to make men holy, so they died to make men free. This devotional principle does not always call for life, but it always means sacrifice of some kind. No man does great things without great sacrifice. No cause was ever victorious against evil for which men and women have not lived and suffered and died. And the secret of true powerful success has been that they dared to look beyond the paltry visible surroundings of that cause. It was this devotional principle which dragged William Lloyd Garrison through the streets of Boston at the heels of a howling mob. Only if a question of the doors I will take it.
Okay. It's time for Dr. Reverend Anna Howard Shaw, the most amazing person ever. She was a minister who couldn't preach to a congregation simply because she was a woman. She also attended BU's medical school but never practiced because she took up the cause for temperance and suffrage. Giving an encore performance of her 1915 speech is Savannah Utze. Her partner in speech was unable to make it, so I'll be reading that part.
When I came into your hall tonight, I thought of the last time I was in your city. 21 years ago was and we came here for the exact same purpose as to which we are here tonight. Boys have been born since that time and have become voters, while women are still trying to convince American men on the fundamental principles of democracy. For the only thing women's enfranchisement means at all is that a form of government which claims to be a republic is a republic and not an aristocracy. The problem with arguing this with those who oppose us is that they will bring up a number of arguments, but none of them have anything to do with women's suffrage. They always have something to do with something else.
Therefore, the arguments which we have to make rarely ever have anything to do with the subject, because we have to answer our opponents, who always escape the subject as far as possible in order to have any sort of reason in connection with what they say. When suffragists are feminists, and when I ask what that is, no one is able to tell me. I would give anything to know what a feminist is. They say, would you like to be a feminist? If I could find out, I would. You either have to be masculine or feminine, and I prefer feminine. Then they cry that we are socialists and anarchists. Just how a human can be both at the same time, I really do not know. If I know what socialism means, it means absolute government. And anarchism means no government at all. So, we are feminists, socialists, anarchists, oh, and Mormons and spinsters. Now, as a matter of fact, as a unit, we are nothing. As individuals, we are like all other individuals. We have our theories and beliefs, but as suffragists, we have but one belief, one principle, one theory, and that is the right of a human being to have a voice in the government under which he or she lives. And that we agree, if nothing else.
A young married woman approached me in New Jersey. She had left her husband home for 3 months to tell women that their place was at home and they could not leave home long enough to go to the ballot. And she brought out all her arguments in pairs and backed them up by statistics. The anti-suffragists can gather more statistics than any person I've ever saw. And there's nothing so sweet as when they say,
You cannot deny this because here are the figures, and the figures never lie.
yeah, they don't, but some liars figure.
When they start out, they always begin the same. She started by proving it was no use to give the woman the ballot because if they did have it, they would not use it, and she had statistics to prove it.
If we would not use it, I do not see the harm in giving it to us.
Then the young lady, unfortunately for her first argument, proved by statistics, of which she had many, the awful results which happened where women did have the ballot. What awful laws have been brought about by women's vote. The conditions that prevail in the homes and how deeply women get interested in politics.
Because women are hysterical. we just cease to care for our children, cease to care for our families, cease to love our husbands, go down to the polls, vote 10 hours a day, 365 days in a year, never let up. If you get us to the polls one time, we will never leave. So that women will vote and then will do anything but vote. Then they tell you that if women get the vote, it will be a great expense, and they will vote just as their husbands do.
Even if we have no husbands, that would not affect the result because we would vote just as our husbands would vote if we had one. How I wish.
How I wish we can make the anti-suffragists believe that. If we can make men believe that women would just vote as their husbands do you think we'd have to make another meeting or hold another speech? We would have to vote whether we wanted to or not at all.
And then the very one who will tell you that women will vote just as their husbands do will tell you in 5 minutes that they will not vote as their husbands will. And then the discord in the homes and the divorce.
I was having a discussion with a gentleman in North Carolina, and he said that he and his wife had lived together for 20 years and had been married and lived together for 20 years, I just said. He said that he was worried that if women got the vote, his wife would vote differently than him and it would break the beautiful harmony which they had had for that full 20 years. And while he was talking, I couldn't help but wonder, who was the idiot? Because I knew no two intelligent human beings could live together for 20 years and not have a difference of opinion. I looked at that splendid type of manlyhood and thought, how would a man feel being tagged up by a little woman going, me too, for 20 years?
Then the other belief that women would not vote if they had a vote and would not do anything else.
And would vote as their husbands do and would not vote as their husbands do.
That women have so many burdens that they cannot bear another burden. And that women are the leisure class.
That we have no time. And we are so burdened that we couldn't possibly have another burden.
Then if that is so, I think we ought to allow the women to vote instead of the men. Since we pay a man anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 more than we do women, it would be better to use up the cheap time of the women instead of the dear time of the men.
And speaking of time, you would have thought it would take a week to vote. A dear old friend of mine told me, Miss Shaw, and she held up her baby in her hands, is this not my job? I said, why, it certainly is. She said, how can I neglect my baby and go vote? I said, has your husband a job? She said, why, you know he has. I did know. He was a banker and a very busy one at that. I said, yet your husband has to leave his job to go vote? She said, yes, he is so interested in the election. I said, what an advantage you have over your husband. He has to leave his job. Well, you don't need to neglect your job. You can just take it with you. Isn't it funny that the only time a woman may neglect her baby is on election day? And the dear old antis will throw up their hands and say, you have neglected your baby.
A woman can belong to a whist club and go once a week and play whist. She cannot take her baby to the whist club. She can go to the theater, to church, or a picnic. No one is worrying about the baby, but to vote, and everyone cries out about the neglect. You would think on election day that a woman grabbed up her baby and started out and just dropped it somewhere, paid no attention to it. It used to be asked when we had the question box, who will take care of the babies? I did not know what person could be got to take care of all those babies, so I thought I would go out west and find out. I went to Denver and I found that they took care of the babies just the same on election day as they did on every other day. They took their baby along with them. When they went to put a letter in the box, they took their baby along. And when they went to put their ballot in the box, they took their baby along.
If a mother was standing in line and her baby got restless, she would simply juggle it with her. And when she went in to vote, then there would be a neighbor, and they would simply joggle to the car. And if there was no neighbor, then there was the candidate, and he would joggle to the car.
That is one day in the year when you can get 100 people to take care of any number of babies. I've never worried about the babies on election days since that time.
Now, what does it matter whether women will vote as their husbands or will not? Whether they have the time or have not? Whether they will vote for prohibition or will not? What does this have to do with the fundamental principle of democracy? We have not yet figured out.
But they cannot argue on that. They cannot argue on the fundamental basis of our existence. So they have to get off on all these side tricks to get anything approaching an argument.
If women vote, will they go to war? They're great on having us fight. I was speaking in North Dakota on an automobile in front of a large crowd, and a large number of men gathered around a single man sitting in front of a storefront whittling a stick. He called out to another man, "If women vote, will they go over to Germany and fight the Germans?" I said, "Why should we go over to Germany and fight the Germans?" He said, "If they come over here, would you fight?" I said, "Why should we fight a bunch of men? But if Germany were to send an army of women, we'd show you what we do." We'd go, "Come on, let's go to the opera house and talk this matter over." It would grow wearisome, but it wouldn't be done.
Would it not be better if the heads of the governments in Europe had talked things over? What might have happened to the world if a dozen men had gotten together in Europe and settled the awful controversy, which is today discriminating the nations of Europe? We women got together last year over in Rome, the delegates from 28 different nations of women. We passed a great number of resolutions, but 2 of them were passed unanimously. We called upon all civilizations of the world to give women equal rights with men, and there was not a dissenting vote. The other resolution was on peace. We believed then, and many of us believe today, notwithstanding all the discussion that is going on. We believe and we will continue to believe.
Speaking to you today, I speak for them. Just as each one of us speaks for women around the world who are denied the chance to go to school, or see a doctor, or own property, or have a say about the direction of their lives simply because they are women. We also must recognize that women will never gain full dignity until their human rights are respected and protected. No one should be forced to remain silent for fear of political or religious persecution, arrest, abuse, or torture. I believe that on the eve of a new millennium, it is time to break our silence. It is time for us to say, here in Beijing, and for the world to hear, that it is no longer acceptable to discuss human rights as separate from women's rights. One minute. Okay. Wait. Oh boy. No, you got it. No, I have this. Oh, okay. These abuses have continued because, for far too long, the history of women has been a history of silence. Even today, there are those who are trying to silence our words. If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, it is that human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. Now it is time to act on behalf of women everywhere. Let this conference be our, and the world's, call to action, and let us heed the call, so that we may create a world in which women are treated with respect and dignity, every boy and girl is loved and cared for equally, and every family has the hope of a strong and stable future. Thank you very much.
"16 years later, in 2010, former and first female appointed Secretary of State Madeleine Albright gave a speech at the White House commemorating International Women's Day, where the sentiments of Secretary Clinton were repeated and are delivered today by Maya Stafford.
International Women's Day reminds us of a lesson that we have long since learned but have not yet sufficiently put into practice. A lesson that is grounded in principle but also with experience. The principle that the basic rights and dignity of women and girls should be accorded the same respect as that given to men and boys. The principle endorsed over and over again in global conferences and covenants. Our experience is that when women are given the power to make our own choices, we will benefit because the chains of poverty can be broken. Families grow stronger, environmental awareness deepens, and socially constructive values are more likely to be handed down to the young. This experience has been validated in communities on every continent. And yet, women all over the globe are still an undervalued and underutilized human resource. That is not to say women have trouble finding work. Often they do the vast majority of the work. But don't own land, aren't taught to read, can't obtain credit, and don't get paid. Women have made great progress in obtaining legal recognition of their rights, but frequently, even if the laws and the books are just, the reality in homes and villages are not. Appalling abuses are still being committed against women, and those include domestic violence, dowry murders, coerced abortions, honor crimes, and the killing of infants simply because they are born female. Some say all this is cultural. There's nothing anyone can do about it. I say it's criminal. We each have an obligation to stop it. I have been in public life for more than 3 decades and have attended many events related to international women's rights. And each, uplifting goals were announced. But our purpose for today and tomorrow and throughout this century is not to articulate more promises, but to achieve real breakthroughs by caring for one another, by uplifting each other, and by building an action network that stretches across every border of nation, race, background, and creed. To illustrate, I'd like to offer a poem written by the granddaughter of a community organizer from America's Midwest. Her name is Marge Piercy, and her poem begins with a question. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can bust you. They can break your fingers. They can burn your brain with electricity. They can take your child. They can do anything, and you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone you can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But 2 people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. 2 people can keep each other's aim, can give support, conviction, love, hope. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 4, you can play bridge and start an organization. With 6, you can rent a house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and start a fundraising party. 12 make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 solidarity in your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. And it starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again, even after they said no. And it starts when you say we, and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. As these words remind us, progress in women's rights occurs step by step, and each victory becomes a platform upon which the next one may be built. Our shared task is to keep building, until we raise enough platforms high enough to transform the very horizons of the earth. And in that quest, we invite everyone to help us, and caution each that they cannot stop us. Thank you very much.
We conclude our evening with words that may be familiar to most but will be remembered for generations to come. Logan Joseph and an ensemble comprised of the classes of 27 and 28 perform Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb.
When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade?
The loss we carry, a sea we must wade.
We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace.
And the norms and notions of what just is, isn't always just this.
And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it.
Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean.
We are striving to form a union that's perfect.
We are striving to forge a union with purpose.
To compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man.
So we lift our gaze not to what stands between us,
but what stands before us.
We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside.
We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another.
We seek harm to none and harmony for all.
Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true.
That even as we grieved, we grew.
That even as we hurt,
we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. that will forever be tied together, victorious,
Not because we will never again know defeat.
but because we will never again sow division,
Scripture tells us to envision.
that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid.
If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all of the bridges we've made.
That is a promise to Glade.
The hill we climb if only we dare it.
Because being American is more than a pride we inherit.
It's the past we step into and how we repair it.
We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it.
That would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded.
But while democracy can periodically be delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
In this truth,
In this faith,
We trust.
For while we have our eyes on the future,
History has its eyes
on us. This is the era of just redemption we feared in its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour.
But within it we found the power.
To author a new chapter.
To offer hope and laughter.
To ourselves. So while once we asked, how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert.
How can catastrophe possibly prevail over us?
We will not march back to what was.
but move to what shall be.
A country that is bruised but whole.
Benevolent but bold.
Fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation.
because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation.
Our blunders become their burden.
But one thing is certain, if we merge mercy with might,
And might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright.
So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left.
With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one.
We will rise from the golden hills of the west.
We will rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution.
We will rise from the lakefront cities of the Midwestern states.
We will rise from the sun-baked south.
We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover.
In every known nook of our nation,
In every corner called our country,
our people.
diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful.
When the day comes,
We step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid.
A new dawn blooms as we free it.
For there is always light.
If only,
We're brave enough to see it,
if only.
we're brave enough to be it.
to beat it.
Each year, 11th grade students from Mr. Gilday's U.S. History course spend months researching and developing a 10-page thesis-driven argument on a topic of their choosing. Tonight is the culmination of that process, the Susan Martin Hayes Founders Paper Competition. Ms. Hayes was a beloved history teacher at Woodward from the late 1970s till 1998. Ms. Hayes institutionalized the Founders Paper as a rite of passage for the junior class. Upon her sudden passing, members of the Woodward community endowed 2 scholarships in Ms. Hayes' name, one going to the Founders Night Prize winner. The other will be awarded later to a graduating senior. This year's 3 finalists made compelling arguments on an eclectic range of topics. This essay highlights the specific choices made by the FCC and other governmental agencies which led to cable's domination of urban markets in modern society. Sexist Treatment of American Housewives in the 1950s by Maya Stafford. Popular culture asks us to focus on Lucy Ricardo, June Cleaver, and Donna Reed. Maya asks the reader to look deeper. Maya points out how technological innovations were not time savers, but rather devices that increased expectations. How prosperity was driven by advertisements that deepened gender roles. How a never-ending quest for perfection resulted in a mental health crisis. In the end, Maya encourages the reader to re-examine our modern standards armed with this knowledge. Sexism's impact on the Triangle Shirt Waist Factory fire and trial. Grace Conley. New life into this, oh yeah, I remember that from high school history topic, by focusing on oral histories and trial transcripts. The essay paints a picture of a hostile workplace where women are forced to remain at work longer to be searched while male co-workers leave promptly. It is so vivid, the reader can almost see the lawyer's smirk when he refers to a fire survivor as little girl. on the witness stand. Okay. Could I have the envelope, please? And the winner is Grace Connolly. For the Christina Cutler-Coots presentation, I'd like to invite Rick Cutler to the stage.
Let me get a hand for all of these girls. The young women who were up here tonight, but all of the Woodard students. Let's hear it for all of them. The reason I'm here is many years ago, my older sister, class of 1969, was a Woodard student, just like you guys. And her best friend Eileen, who is now and has been one of the board members for a long time, the two of them were inseparable during school. Chris, unfortunately, passed away at the age of 22. Yeah. Her daughter is here. My lovely niece, Katie, is here tonight. To remember her friend, Eileen started an award called the Christina Cutler-Coots Award, given out every year, and the money goes to a specific program. Every year it's decided by everyone on who's going to do what. Before I get to what this award is, you gave me the stage, so I got to use it a little bit. But seriously, we are in kind of a dark time. You all know that. But how do you get rid of darkness? You put light on it. We're in a time of some real ignorance. But how do you get rid of ignorance? You put knowledge to it. What I hear from all of you young ladies is unbelievable knowledge. This is the 24th year that I've been coming here for this Christina Cutler-Coots Award. 24 years in a row it's been going on. Every single year I am so impressed by all of you girls, young women, I'm sorry, impressed by all of you young women. It's unbelievable what this school has done for you. I'm sure that I'm looking out, I'm seeing probably a future lawyer, or a future doctor, or a future scientist, or maybe if you dare, a future president. We're going to have a woman president someday. We're going to have her. Don't give up. Read your books. I know I'm old, I'm an old gray guy. The internet has its purposes, but it also makes your brain skip over. And I can see from the memorization that's gone on here tonight, these beautiful speeches that you've recited, that you all know how to really learn things, not just gloss over things. Be proud of yourselves and keep doing it. It's an honor every year to be asked to stand here and talk with you all. It truly is. This year's award is going to the middle school, and they're going to go to the Nature's Classroom, an overnight field trip on Cape where they'll learn about environmental issues. I think that's, let's give a hand to the middle school. Thank you every year for the honor of letting me come and remember my sister.
Impressive. That's all I can say. I recently spoke with Elizabeth Linsky, class of 1957, who shared this delightful poem from the 1950s in a letter to me that I'll share with you, that if you were here last year, you might remember. Root toot toot, we are the girls of the Institute. We don't smoke and we don't swear, and we don't go with boys who do. You may think we don't have fun, we don't. And I'm so happy to have all of you here with us tonight, and it's great to have Rick and his family here as usual on an annual visit. And as I was preparing for his visit today, I was looking through his sister Christina's yearbook in preparation for his visit. And she wrote a quote in her yearbook that I found meaningful that I just wanted to share. It's pretty short. But so long as one does not despair, so long as one does not look upon life bitterly, things work out fairly well in the end. And I certainly believe Christina's quote still resonates today. And thank you everyone for being here tonight, and safe drive home, and we look forward to this event again next year.